Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, wherever you're joining us, whether you're in California, Idaho, Michigan, wherever you are, we just want to say thank you for joining us in this journey. We spend countless hours every week attempting to really delve into who the authors were, what the words meant, all of these different elements so that we can truly, responsibly understand the text. And so we do the effort, we put the time in. And so we would love for you to continue partnering with us, sharing these videos, viewing them, taking part in conversations. We'd love for you to join us in this journey. We think the Bible is filled with so much beauty, so much relevant material, even for today in 2021. And so today we continue the journey through the book of Genesis. And so a reminder here, Genesis is not a book that basically captures perfect literal history, right? Tribes during that time were not writing literal history. They were not writing specific dates and times. They're writing stories. And so Israel, following those similar tribal ways, they too wrote stories. They wrote poetry. They wrote messages from their kings. That's how they wrote. And so they compiled all of these pieces into what we know as Torah. And so the question often is, why compile them, right? What's the cause? Were they trying to keep history? Well, for them, not really, right? We talk about this. 587 BC, Israel is captured and their temple's destroyed, and they are taken captive in Babylon by one of the largest empires, right? And so they're taken to this city in Babylon, and basically most other empires or tribes that have been taken by this larger empire, they would assimilate. They'd take on Babylon's gods, Babylon's traditions, Babylon's rituals. But Israel says, we will not bow our knee, right? We will not give up our rituals and our values. We won't do that. Even though it's the easy way, we're not going to do it. We're going to hold on to what it means to be Jewish. And so that's what they did. And so they compiled all of these stories and all of these poems and epic journeys. They put all of it together, right? The campfire stories, all of it, so that they would not assimilate. And so that's why for them, whenever they see Torah brought out, the scrolls, there's joy, there's celebration. And so they see themselves in the story. So we like to tell you every week, Torah is a complete narrative of Israel miniaturized through its telling. So every time you see a figure, Moses, Isaiah, Abraham, Joseph, all these different individuals, know that Israel is right there, right? They see themselves in the story, in the conflict, in the resolutions, right? As the heroes, but also sometimes the villains. They see themselves in the story. And so today we move through chapter 22. We are getting closer to halfway. It's been a while. All right, so let me start by reading the text to you first. Here we go. We're going to move through 11, starting with verse 11 in chapter 24. And he made the camels kneel outside the city beside the well of water at eventide. At the time the maidens go out to draw water. So again, this is the servant of Abraham. He's been told to go here to Nahor, and he's going to find Isaac's wife, right? He's going to find for Isaac a wife. And so he knows to go to the well, and there at the well, some specific things are going to happen. And so will they happen? Let's find out. And he said to the Lord, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please cause to happen to me today. Perform loving kindness with my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the water fountain, and the daughters of the people of the city are coming out to draw water. And it will be that the maiden to whom I will say, lower your pitcher and I will drink, and she will say, drink, and I will also water your camels. Her have you designed for your servant, Isaac, and through her may I know that you have performed loving kindness with my master. So again, he's kind of saying, this is how it's going to happen. This is how God has said it. And hopefully that's going to take place, right? So watch. Now he had not yet finished speaking. And behold, Rebekah came out, who had been born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother. So again, he's going back to Abraham's roots, right? and her pitcher was on her shoulder. Now the maiden was of very comely appearance, a virgin, and no man had been intimate with her. And she went down to the fountain, and she filled her pitcher and went up. And the servant ran toward her, and he said, "Please let me sip of a little water from your pitcher." And she said, "Drink, my lord." And she hastened and lowered her pitcher to her hand, and she gave him to drink. And she finished giving him the drink, and she said, "I will also draw from your camels until they have finished drinking." And she hastened, and she emptied her pitcher into the trough, and she ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew it for his camels. And the man was astonished at her standing silent, waiting to know whether the Lord had caused his way to prosper or not. Now it came about, when the camels had finished drinking, that the man took a golden nose ring weighing half a shekel, and 2 bracelets from her hands weighing 10 gold shekels. And he said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me. Is there a place for us for lodging in your father's house?" And she said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." And she said to him, "Both straw and fodder are plentiful with us. There is also a place to lodge." And the man kneeled and prostrated himself to the Lord. And he said, "Blessed is the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth from my master. And for me, the Lord led me on the road to the house of my master's kinsman." And the maiden ran, and she told her mother's house what had happened. Right? This miraculous thing. So let's delve in verse by verse. Here we go. Verse 11. And he made the camels kneel outside the city, beside the well of water, at eventide at the time the maidens go out. So notice this right from the get-go. Miracles tend to happen for Israel in their stories at wells. We just know this. Wells, it's a big point here. It's a tipping point for them. They're like, oh, a well, something big's going to happen, right? For Israel, this is where God brings promise, life. The well in Israel narrative is often the place where big things begin to come alive. So for Israel, their story kind of finishes with Abraham, but it's about to begin with Isaac, and something miraculous will take place, right? Every time the miraculous takes place, Israel has a new birth. Whether it's a birth out of Egypt, a literal birth of a new son, this is what takes place. So we continue. And he said, "O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please cause to happen to me today. Perform loving kindness with my master Abraham." Notice this, the prayer is not for him. The prayer of the servant is not for him. It's a prayer for others. One rabbi actually says this, and I find this really beautiful. He said, Abraham's servant's heart causes him to pray the prayer of blessing, right? Blessing for others. This prayer can be given to our friends and our enemies. It is a prayer of placement. Place me where I may share the blessing, right? So watch this now. "Behold, I am standing by the water fountain, and the daughters of people of the city are coming out to draw water." Like, notice what happens here, right? When the servant prays the prayer, right? "Put me in the right place at the right time so that I might bless others." Notice what happens. Right away, the daughters are coming out, right? He didn't even finish the prayer, and all of a sudden, boom, the blessing happens, right? The blessing takes place. Put me in the place where I might be a blessing, right? Place me where I may share the blessing. Think about that. What if that was your prayer, right? Place me where I need to be. Guide me to the well where the water is. What if every morning you woke up and said, "Lord, today, place me where I need to be. Put me where I need to be." I think in our culture, we ask for things a lot, don't we? Right? We get caught up with, "I just wish I had this thing and this thing and this thing." And those are our prayers. Because again, we are a culture that consumed. And because we consume so much, rarely are we consumed by things that matter, right? So for Israel, this idea of like asking for things instead of opportunities would have been very foreign to them, right? This would have been very odd because opportunities can grow, right? Opportunities build, expand. Things are often static, right? And short-sighted. And so opportunities, those are for the long haul. Ask for opportunities, not things. Beautiful. Yeah. The prayer of placement. It's a really cool idea. Guide me over give me, right? The idea, again, for asking things really foreign to them. Really foreign to them. They knew they needed to work to be put in places where they could move and seek and find. Right? And that's why we have so many verses. Knock and the door will be open to you. Seek and you shall find. This is actually an ancient concept way back in the Old Testament. Right? Jesus was actually quoting Jeremiah 29:13. It says here, you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. That's the concept of placement here, right? The divine, to find the divine, to find real life, it has to be searched for, right? And it's in the act of searching. It's in the act of being in the right place, searching, journeying. The servant had to journey, right? Search for it. That's where we find God, right? It's in the journey. And so the promise isn't found at the end, right? God is not found at the end. That you didn't travel on this journey and find the treasure, right? Those are children's stories. The idea here that is so deeply beautiful about this prayer of placement, put me where you need to be so that I might travel the place I need to go. This idea is God, according to the Hebrews, is actually found in the searching. When you search, when you journey, when you move to these various places of placement, that's God. It's a very abstract idea, but it's a really beautiful one. God is found in the highs and the lows. God is where the journey is. When you step in, that's when we begin experiencing the divine. It's when we sit back, we stay home, we don't step out. That's when we begin to die. But the idea here is, God, place me in the journey. Put me in the spot and I'll move. I'll go wherever it takes. And the servant does. Place me now where you need me to be. And he says, okay. And bam, the journey begins, right? The divine has performed loving kindness, and this is where it's going. So watch this now. Verse 14, put me where you need to be. Bam. All of a sudden, all the women come out to the well. That's when it takes place, right? The God of the journey has taken you here. You asked to be placed where you need to be, and blessings are already overflowing. It's a really cool idea. So here we go. And it will be the maiden to whom I will say, lower your pitcher and I will drink. And she will say, drink, and I will also water your camels. Her have you designed for your servant, for Isaac. And through her may I know that you have performed loving kindness with my master. Again, the divine has performed loving kindness. It's a really beautiful idea. When real miracles take place, right? When really powerful things happen, he's saying, okay, the women have started coming out. Wow, can't believe it. Okay, well, next thing, what's going to happen? Well, okay, one of them is going to give me water. One of them is going to, at the same time, then ask me if my camels will be fulfilled. If this happens, I'll know, right? How many times have we done that? We've said, okay, if this and this happens, I'll know it was God, right? It's almost like you're tempting fate, tempting God. And oftentimes things happen, don't they? The miraculous takes place. And I think in those moments, like he's saying, if this happens and this happens, it must be a God thing. And so we'll look back and we'll realize, man, for this and this to have happened, that was pretty miraculous. I remember there was a point in my life, I was struggling with what to do. Struggling. I was in a really difficult place and I needed guidance. In fact, I was saying these prayers of like, I just wish I could just come across a bunch of money. And I thought maybe that would solve all my problems. Well, a weird thing happened. I met Sid on an airplane. I'm sitting on this airplane with my wife and our child. And it's Southwest. And so Southwest, you can choose your seats. And so at the end, when everyone's getting in their seats and everyone's pretty much done, I see this one guy come in late and he's sizing every seat up and he notices that the only seats available are between two really large men, middle seat, or the one next to me and a baby that's kind of throwing a fit and a mother, but he would get an aisle seat. So he chooses the lesser of two evils. And so we're sitting there and he begins asking me what I do. And I say, well, I teach English and I'm doing this and this. And I really love reading. And I'm telling him all these things. And he says, what if money was not an option for you? Which is funny because I was thinking about that. So I started telling him what I think I do, and I do this and this and this. He says, oh, okay, interesting. He said, you know what? I'm going to be in Golden, Colorado, which was not too far from my house at that time. Let's have dinner. Let's meet. My name's Sid Himmel. Here's my card. I look at his card, and Sid was a wonderful man, super fantastic person. He ended up meeting me. I found out Sid is doing really well. He's got a lot of money. And I started thinking about all the things he was gonna do for me. Right? He was gonna offer me a job. I was gonna be doing great and money. Wow, God answered my prayer with money. But we sat down and he said, I've been thinking about you a lot, Tony. And he said, all those things you're so passionate about. He said, I think if you got the money, you might not be doing all those things you're passionate about. You might get kind of bored quick. He said, I feel impressed to tell you it's in the struggle. It's in the struggle that you are continuing to build resilience. And I think that's what has made you such an interesting person to me. He said, I could write you a check today, but I don't think it would satisfy, would it? And I thought about that for a while. And I thought about that when I left and I went back home. And I went into ministry later that month. And it began to all dawn on me that, wow, it wasn't about the money. I needed someone who had the money to tell me they could give it to me, but then to realize it wasn't about the money. There's something so much bigger that my soul is aching to do. And I needed that at that moment. And I'd remembered that I'd been saying that prayer, God, just put me in the right place, put me in the right place. And he did. And I look back and I think that whole experience couldn't have been a better, more perfectly planned one, right? I was in the right place at the right time. And I heard the message that I needed to hear at the right place in the right time. And I think in this moment, this is what happens for the servant. If I see this and I see this, then this will happen. And when I look back, it's got to be God, right? These are these moments that oftentimes we don't even know how to explain, but they just happen, don't they? And we will say it was a miracle, right? It was a miracle. Let me continue reading on. Now he had not yet finished speaking, and behold, Rebekah came out. Rebekah, remember, names are important. Names have meaning. Right? Every story, every Hebrew story, whenever you hear a name, we always look to see what that name means. And so big surprise, Rebekah. Rebekah means the choice calf, the best choice, right? And so again, this is why we read these stories from a bigger perspective. We don't look at them as literal, even though they may or may not have been literal. We don't know for certain, but we know this. The author's trying to tell you something. This was the woman that from the group of women was the best of the best, right? Because only the best of the best could be the wife for Isaac, right? That's going to continue on the tribe of Israel. The best of the best. She's the absolute best. And so names again. And so then after that, Rebekah came out, who had been born of Bethulah and Milcah, right? Bethulah and Milcah. Important again. Bethulah, man of God. Milcah, queen, right? So big surprise, right? Bethuel, her father is a man of God. Her mother's a queen, right? Heritage, always important to the Hebrews. Super important, especially when you're talking about these ancestors and your genealogy, right? Important for tribal culture. That's really what this was. So it continues on in verse 16. Now the maiden was very comely appearance, a virgin, and no man had been intimate with her, and she went down to the fountain, and she filled her pitcher and went up. So please keep in mind here, women during that time era Their worth came from how many children, specifically male, they would bear. Right? A woman's worth often was associated with what they called their purity. Right? These ideas, again, in our culture, we have moved past this idea that a woman's worth is only from how many children they have. But this, if you want to keep your tribe going and you're a nomadic group of people, then that's going to be very important to them. Right? And so that's how they viewed women's worth. Do we agree with that? Well, no, we've kind of grown, but that's just how they were. They are a group of people and they're growing in their ethic and their understanding of the world. But this is why this is added there, right? She has worth. And keep in mind, keep considering she's a Gentile, right? She's an outsider. And so her purity, that would have been a very important element as well to bring up if you are a Jewish person and everyone else is the other. So it continues. And the servant ran toward her and he said, "Please let me sip a little water from your pitcher." And she said, "Drink, my lord." And she hastened and lowered her pitcher to her hand, and she gave him to drink. And she finished giving him a drink, and she said, "I will also draw from your camels until they have finished drinking." And she hastened and she emptied her pitcher into the trough. She ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew from all her camels. So notice this. Like, I absolutely love this. She is an outsider. And yet she does something that Torah, that Hebrews would have said would characterize what a Hebrew does, their actions. She does this as an outsider, right? She does this thing. Deuteronomy 14:28 through 29 says it very clearly. And we'll have it later on. Jesus says, love the widow, the foreigner, and the stranger. Love these people, the outsider. Right? He eats and drinks and spends time healing the outsider. But if you understand Torah, that message has always been there. There is worth in the outsider, right? Watch the outsider. Take care of the outsider. Deuteronomy says this: "At the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithes that the years produce, store it in your towns, so that the Levites, who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, and the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied, and so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the works of your hands." So get this here. She's a Gentile, right? She brings him water. Yeah, the person that you don't expect, right? It's like the homeless person walking up to you and saying, "Hey, you look kind of hungry. Can I share a meal with you?" And break a sandwich in half, right? This would have been a bit humbling if you were an Israelite reading this. Yeah, think about that for just a second. The homeless man breaking his sandwich, giving it to you. This woman is very different, right? This woman is a catch. That's the deeper idea here. The foreigner, the stranger, the other has just done something that Torah has been telling us to do the whole time. And she's done it without Torah. Wow, right? Interesting. And so it continues. She does this thing that characterizes her as a Hebrew. And so again, notice in 21, he is astonished. He's astonished by her. He cannot believe that the foreigner would do it. He is so shocked. And I think in some ways that's sad in our culture. We have certain ideas about certain people, right? That person's wearing a BLM shirt. They must be this and this. That person's got a MAGA hat. They must be this and this. But isn't it interesting? Wouldn't it throw you off if the people you characterize as crazy out there turned out to be the person that helped you with your flat tire? Right? In those moments, it shifts everything. They become human again. In fact, not just human, but good people, virtuous people. Yeah, those moments are beautiful. I'm finding those moments, I stop and I appreciate those moments. Now it came about when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a golden nose ring weighing half a shekel, 2 bracelets from her hand weighing 10 golds. Notice this, there are many different groups of people who will say, jewelry's bad, jewelry's bad. This is just one of 20 plus verses showing jewelry was a blessing to people in the tribal era. right? This idea that jewelry is bad, it's whatever, that's pure baloney, right? If the Bible's where you're finding information and finding your virtue, your lifestyle choices, then jewelry is something you should be wearing, right? This is everywhere in there, and so interesting point. He makes sure to bless her by giving her these gifts, right? It's almost like an anointing moment for this woman. I'm anointing you. I'm saying you are worthy. I'm blessing you. It's a really cool concept here. And so it continues. And she said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore as Nahor. The miracle you're looking for is right here. And again, surprise, right? This moment of perception shift, right? It's someone from outside your tribe. And it's caused you to have a total shift of other tribes and other nations. The whole thing causes a quick shift. Everything moves, everything changes, right? When we see the narrative of like Jonah and the whale, right? The stories where the character has an idea of a certain people and is shocked to find his neighbors, whom again he is considered outsiders, evil, bad, barbaric. You fill in the blank. Finds himself shocked that they can be obedient, virtuous people, even more so sometimes in his own tribe. It is a shock. And so for Israel in this moment, when they're reading this about this woman, this Gentile woman, not of their tribe, right? They are shocked. And so for Israel, the lesson would be an interesting one. It's one they learn and they unlearn and they have to learn again. Right? They have to learn to view their neighbors from new perspectives. And again, once they do, once they see they have so much in common, you don't see as much warring. But when they forget, they go to war and they become captives, and you see this vicious cycle over and over again. And so as they travel through the Middle East, they're constantly having to question again, who is my neighbor? How do I show love to other people? How do I view the world through a different lens, through a Torah lens? Oh, yeah, the choicest, most beautiful woman is actually more virtuous than the women of our tribe. Heavy, heavy if you were a Jewish person reading that. So how do we apply that today? Man, like we talk a lot about diversity in our culture. A lot. What if our diversity is actually the bridge that brings connection? Think about that one for a moment. What if our diversity is what can bring us together to cause us to ask questions of one another? And what if as we're asking questions of one another, we find we have far more in common than we don't? What if that diversity could be the thing that binds us? I know right now in our culture, we're constantly, by the media and everything else, we're constantly being divided, right? But if we're having actual conversations with one another, if we stop the constant name tagging and the name calling and these other things, once we actually sit down with people and have conversation, once we sit at the well, we actually find we have more in common than we don't. But that takes more than reading a book on white fragility, doesn't it? Yeah, it actually means you come together and you talk with people. You get shared experiences. You find out what makes someone tick. You find out their struggles, their pain, and you have the conversations, and it's a two-way street. So when that diversity brings us together and we ask questions of one another, we grow, we make connection, we build bridges. That's the beauty of diversity. And it's so good. And so I thought about how can we bring it home? Here's some ideas that I've borrowed, begged, stolen from many different sources, but I wanted to share those with you today because I think right now this has become a crazy sword that divides people, this topic. So let me share with you some ideas that I think are really powerful, palatable right here. How do we become more culturally aware, right? And I'm not talking about white fragility, these kind of books. How do I become aware of my, my privilege or this or that? That's not where I'm going with this at all. So feel safe with that. But simply, how do I become more aware of different diversity, different cultures around me? Number one, think beyond race and ethnicity. This is so important when it's just being slammed in our faces constantly. Right now, especially, right? A person's culture is shaped by more than the color of their skin or the way they dress. It's shaped by the person's life experiences. That's the big point, right? And traditions, which may be seen or unseen, but to the naked eye. So that's where, again, when we think beyond color, race, ethnicity, when we go deeper, we find some of those threads are very common, connected to us, and we can begin to enjoy and understand one another better. Another concept, learn by asking. I think this is so important. The other day, I had a great conversation with a friend. He's a black man. I'm a white man. And I had these conversations. I asked questions. Hey, I'm being told this, that many people think that this and this and this is going on. What do you think about that? And man, what an interesting conversation, right? He said, I feel like people are trying to speak for me, people who don't understand me. And it's frustrating. It was so interesting. So don't be afraid to ask questions. People feel respected and appreciated when other people take genuine interest in who they are. So ask questions. Ask open-ended questions about culture. Learn, right? Grow from it. And those questions will be asked back to you. It's a conversation. Right? Number three, pay attention to nonverbal behaviors. This one's really fascinating to me. Really fascinating. Meaning, again, body language says everything. And so sometimes it differs by cultural norms, but pay attention to how your body language is perceived by others, right? If I am standing back at a distance, what am I saying to someone? If I get close, if I'm nodding, these are motions, right? These are nonverbals I'm giving to someone that show them I'm connected. I care. I'm not crossing my arms, but I'm focusing on showing that I'm open, I'm listening, I care. I want to hear your story, whether it's just my neighbor or someone I've met at a coffee shop, whatever it is. Focus on what your nonverbals are. I think it's so important. Lastly, exchange stories. All of us love to tell stories. We have lots of them. We are people of the narrative. It's what we are. And so storytelling is a great way to share experiences that go beyond culture, tradition. They basically initiate an open conversation by sharing personal story. And so take time to share those stories. Because I think as we share stories, we basically invite more stories, which is going to invite more connection, more moments of understanding, more moments of awareness. And so those four concepts for me have been big, so important as I'm beginning to continue to traverse this crazy world we live in, this crazy constant change and movement, but so much tagging, so much division. But I think if we keep these four concepts in the back of our minds, I think we can find real connection, build bridges. So everyone, I just want to say thank you for joining me today. That was a heavy one. It probably took you in a place you didn't think it would go. But again, the servant was shocked to see the humanity in someone outside of their tribe. What a beautiful gift. And so, as always, if you found this helpful, consider going to ethos-church.org/donate. We're a nonprofit. Your donations help us continue to do what we do. If you want to continue joining online conversations, Ethos Living Room is a great place to do that. And as always, hit that subscribe button, share these videos. Let's continue building all the platforms we do, but especially YouTube. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week.